Good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock. Welcome to the Green Dialogue. Occasionally, we have special speakers to start off the dialogue, and then we open it up for Q&A. Today, we have a special guest, and you might remember John Sarver, um, who is going to be chatting a little bit about Solarize Meridian. And John has been on our energy team for the township for over 15 years, or about 15 years, and it's also on our environmental commission and a member of the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association. Anything else you want to say about yourself, John, before we get started?
No, that's plenty.
All right, welcome everybody. Anybody else want to say something about John?
Oh, please. Should I get started?
It's probably wise, unless anyone has any urgent news they want to share. Okay, John, take it away.
Okay, let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay, I've just got a few slides to kind of introduce whoops, we'll go backwards. Solarize Meridian. Many of you have probably heard the term, and I'm going to do a brief kind of description. The concept is basically, well, it was started in Ann Arbor. Well, not actually in Ann Arbor, but in Michigan in Ann Arbor. And it's basically the idea that the most credible source for information is probably your neighbor. You may trust your neighbor more than you trust a salesperson or government, and so the whole concept is built around a neighbor reaching out to their neighbors, friends, family to talk about solar. The idea being that your neighbor can help you make an informed decision on buying a solar system. They're not trying to sell anything. They can also help you find a solar installer because they themselves would have already purchased a solar system or would be in the process of buying a solar system. And the idea is to get a fair price and also a group discount because we're talking about this group being a discount group. So every meeting attendee who buys a solar system adds another 1% discount for everyone else. That's the way we're doing it here in Meridian Township. So if 4 group members purchase, each gets an 8% discount. The minimum discount is 5%, and the maximum discount is 15%. When we first got started with this program, I remember I got a phone call. We hadn't specified a maximum, and somebody said, well, I'm going to get 100 people, and we're all going to get free solar systems, right? And I said, well, that's not going to work too well. So we did decide to come up with a maximum of 15%. Just the way the program works is the host actually selects the solar installer for their home and for the program too. And so in Meridian Township, we've been working with Absolute Solar, and Fred is with Absolute Solar and has been kind of a key person in the Solarize efforts. But we ourselves, we being the Meridian Township, don't actually select the solar installers. We're willing to work with other solar installers, but they have to find a host, a customer who's willing to kind of be the host and kind of do marketing, because the program really depends a lot on the marketing of the host. So the host promotes and hosts meetings, sometimes in their homes, sometimes other locations, sometimes on Zoom. And a lot of times an energy team member will kind of help out with the presentation. And certainly an energy team member is willing to work with any host that wants to do one of these programs just as kind of an advisor. So the attendees obtain solar proposals and bids. Usually they have to decide whether they want a proposal in about a week or so, because we have to keep the process moving. And then they get, I think, typically a couple weeks to actually decide whether to purchase a system or not. Again, to kind of keep because we have to decide who's going to buy a system in order to determine the discount. Let's see, and like I said before, the number of purchases in the group determines the discount rate. Now, let me give you just a little history about Meridian Township. We actually started, this was after we did the climate sustainability plan, which was approved by the Township Board in late 2017. The next year, we did 11 solar workshops and reached 272 persons. There was no group discount. This was just an educational program that we did in partnership with civic organizations, Rotary, churches, quite a few houses of faith were partners. And so the partners would do marketing for us and also typically provide a venue. The next year, we had a little more modest program, and it was more like open houses. Solar owners would do open houses. And then we took a little break and decided back in 22 to try the Solarize program. And that seemed to work pretty well. We did 6 meetings that first year and reached over 100 persons, 19 purchases. The next year, this past year, we just did 4 meetings, but actually reached almost as many people and actually resulted in more purchases, 32 purchases. So that was very positive. We have 4 Solarize meetings planned this year, and it's going to be a regional approach. That's the plan, at least, working with Williamston Township, City of East Lansing, and City of Lansing. City of East Lansing and City of Lansing have expressed some interest. Williamston Township is already kind of committed. So as you see, our first meeting is April 1st at our Township Hall. I think the timing is 6 to 7:30. And then we have one May 21st in Williamston Township. In July and September, we're hoping to actually have a meeting in Lansing, East Lansing. The idea being that while a local government is hosting these meetings, anybody within the area actually can attend. The concept, of course, is the more the merrier, because the more people attend, the more likely we get buys, and the greater the number of buys, the bigger the discount. So that's and this is kind of a well, we in the past have done joint meetings with Williamston Township and also with the City of Lansing. So we're kind of expanding it now to hopefully include the City of East Lansing. So this is what we've been up to. These are cumulative totals for the solar systems in the township. This is both residential and commercial. Of course, most of them are residential. And as you can see, we've been making some pretty good progress, especially with the when we started doing the Solarize program. Then my last slide is, this is some of the installations. To the left there, that's David Arnasti's system on his garage. And the middle one is the installation at Hazlitt Community Church. The one to the right top corner is Joe Hess, and that's a condominium application. He had quite a struggle to get his condominium association to approve it, but he was persistent. And then on the bottom left is Roger's garage, where he has a system. And then the last slide is Val Lafferty's system over at, she lives near Lake Lansing, or on Lake Lansing. And she was actually part of one of the previous the Solarize workshops. So that's it for my slides. And Fred's here too to help us kind of talk about the program, since he works with and he works for Absolute Solar. And let me open to discussion and questions if anybody has any.
I do want to add something to what John was saying there. both John and Leroy have been very active in trying to recruit other townships and governing bodies here. In fact, they'll be hosting a workshop here at the end of the month to hopefully bring on in some more of these groups and municipalities. So if you're outside of one of those, there's some hope here that some of the government officials are interested and proactive, like Meridian is. So there's hopefully by the end of the month we have a few more.
Well, I think we can move our discussion on. I think a lot of people here have already heard about Solarize, so that explains why probably there's not a lot of questions.
John,
Oh, there
Go
is
ahead,
one.
Roberta. Go ahead, Roberta.
thanks. This is Roberta. So the target audience for your meetings, the April 1st, is that people who are considering purchasing solar, or people who already have, or someone like me who has but is really wanting to push to add more solar? What?
Yes, I mean, it's targeted at homeowners who it's a residential program in homeowners who are interested in either buying their first system or like your situation where you may be interested in expanding your system.
Okay, great.
So we just get people who are just starting to look into solar or have been thinking about it for a while. But yeah, over time, more and more, I think people, bought a solar system at some point and now they're looking at maybe expanding it. Fred, go ahead.
Okay, thanks.
You're expanding.
No, I'm in that same boat. Yeah, where I put the panels on first and then have slowly transitioned my home away from natural gas as much as I could. And now we drive 2 electric cars. So the system that we installed originally in 2018 on our home is a little overmatched at the moment if we wanted to go full carbon offset. So in fact, Absolute has about 25% of our business we did last year, Roberta, was repeat clients, people that are doing exactly the thing that you're thinking about. So it happens quite frequently with us.
Sarah, did you have a question?
So we've talked about this in the past, and I am just wanting to ask again in terms of township regulations. Are there seeming to be no regulations or not very many for placement on houses? Is that a thing that the township is not regulating at all?
Well, my understanding, and Fred can kind of jump in here too, is that because I've asked this question at different times, we actually have a small wind ordinance, but we don't have really anything special for solar. And when this issue came up, township staff said, our existing regulations work fine. And so we don't have to do anything special. I mean, all the zoning parameters, electrical permits, building permits, which is just kind of normal way of doing business, are applied to solar systems. So yeah, now, and I've asked solar installers at different times, how you doing with Meridian Township? And people have said, oh, fine. We haven't run into any problems. So
no, Meridian Township has been lovely to work with from the solar installer side of it. Not other spots we can absolutely make our way on through, but it's one of the paths of least resistance. Everybody in the township permitting office is fantastic. And our electricians have virtually zero problems. And our designers for our systems here also know all the setbacks and everything that goes into play. So no, Meridian is a gem to work with in this particular area.
Are you having any issues with associations?
Not in Meridian, no. But so I'm a teacher as well. And so up here in DeWitt, where I teach, homeowners associations are causing some delays on some projects, but there's actually legislation in place, John, that's making its way right now that might eliminate that.
Well, we're hopeful. It actually passed the House and the last session last year, and now I just saw there was a hearing in the Senate. So I'm optimistic, hopeful that this legislation would pass. It basically would not allow homeowners associations to arbitrarily prohibit solar systems and other sorts of energy improvements too, for that matter. You know, so I mean, obviously, the township has certain requirements for improvements to, you know, yard setbacks and height restrictions and stuff. But the homeowners association, sometimes they just basically say, no, you can't do it without really any parameters. Joe Hess, who you saw the picture of, he kind of lobbied his condominium association board, and that's even a trickier issue because, you know, the condo association owns the roofs, and was able to negotiate over time to come up with kind of a policy. And once he got that done, there was at least one additional, I think actually 2 additional solar systems put in Spring Lake, which is not, it's kind of down the road for me, down Bircham near Hidden Lake. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Bruce, go ahead.
I'm curious if any of these systems take into account storage, say with like battery backup and inverters.
They can, and I think Fred would describe it right as, well, you know, what happens is you're at this meeting and you decide, okay, I can get a proposal, no cost, no commitment. And so somebody from Absolute Solar goes out and they kind of discuss the specifics of the house and what the customer is interested in. And one option to kind of tack on would be a battery system, or also maybe an EV charger. So that's, Fred, that's something kind of standard almost, right? You kind of talk to the customer and kind of see what they're interested in.
Yeah, I would hope that any company that you're working with here, I'll take off my Absolute Solar hat and put it off to the side here, that any company that you had come on out to the house would listen to your individual wants and needs, especially when it comes to things like the battery, because there's a couple different ways that you can use it, and the expectations need to be set up as such. If you were going to use it just primarily as like an emergency backup situation, then you got to figure out which devices you want to be able to use and for how long, because it's a battery like any other battery. Just like on your cell phone, if you're running a bunch of apps, the battery will go down quicker. If you're being very sparse with it, the battery will last longer. The other way to set that battery on up would be to use sort of time of day. Basically, you store the energy when you're generating more in your battery, and then you can use it in the evening, as opposed to ever having to sell electricity back and forth. So my hope is that whoever you would talk with, whether it's Absolute or any other company, that they would walk you through that process and set the expectations accordingly. But that battery piece should absolutely be part of that, part of the discussion with you.
I think sometimes too, there are actually a lot of the solar systems in Michigan being sold now include battery systems. I've heard numbers like half of the new solar systems include batteries, but I think sometimes, I mean, it's a significant expense. It may not be justified.
Well, and that's one of the nice things that the new tax ruling is that it allows you to sort of chunk the project. It used to be where you need to do everything in one big lump sum, and if you weren't going to do it, then you weren't going to get that tax incentive. Now you can do solar this year, and then maybe 4 years later do the battery, and still get 30% off of that battery then, as opposed to having to lump it all together. So there's that advantage of being able to like piece your project on out if you like.
Yeah, like I'm in a subdivision where I very seldom get outages, and so for me, getting battery backup probably is not justifiable. But I know people who have gotten like a dozen outages over the course of a year, and that situation. If I was in that situation, typically more in rural areas, I would definitely be looking at a battery. Sam?
Yeah, this is really interesting to me. I haven't been looking at solar for several years, but when I talk to people like my neighbors in my area, I don't know if I'm getting the best story, but it's quite quickly I just hear it doesn't work. You know, that in Michigan we don't have enough sunny days. We have too many trees. You know, blah blah blah. There's a million reasons that this just doesn't work, and some people will suggest the geothermal might be the better alternative. And I'm going to just so my one question is, what's the ammunition for this doesn't work? And then the other just sort of just popped up here with about the batteries. Well, if you don't have a battery, does that mean it doesn't work at night? I mean, don't you have to store some electricity somehow in order to have it work continually? I mean, just kind of elaborate on some of that for me. It would be great.
Yeah, well, you know, the thing that some people don't appreciate is that if you don't have a battery, if you do have an outage, your system won't work. And so you have a power source, but it doesn't help you during an outage unless you have a battery. But you know, most folks are using a lot of their power during the day. And if you have a high output day, let's say in August, okay, the excess that your system would produce, let's say you have a system that could produce 100% of your power, but that's give and take over the course of a year. You're producing more during the summer. You're either putting it in a battery or giving it to the utility. If you give it to the utility, they're going to be giving you a bill credit. Now the bill credit's only half the retail rate, so that's something to consider. But that's my situation. You know, it's not unusual, even though I have a relatively small system, to have days with excess power, and I give it to the utility, and they kind of store it for me, and they give me a bill credit that I use in the winter. The geothermal, that's kind of almost if I was just talking to people and they wanted to save money, you know, the first thing is somebody's probably missed an energy efficiency opportunity. And that's probably the first thing you should do. Once you've done everything possible, you know, efficient refrigerators and, you know, LED lights and all that stuff. Yeah, then you're kind of looking at, should you do geothermal? Should you do a solar system? Or should you do a air-to-air heat pump, which would be also an option too, a high efficiency heat pump. Now with the heat pumps, you know, and the geothermal, which are heat pumps, you're basically saving natural gas, unless you're in a rural area, and then you may be either saving electricity or propane. But they're actually separate alternatives to kind of consider. I'm guessing that for most people, the solar system would be a better financial investment. But there's a lot of reasons why people want to do different types of actions, investments. And so that doesn't mean that somebody might not want to do a geothermal system. David Arnosti, I showed you his solar system, later installed a geothermal system, and he has a very small lot. And so, yeah, it's not one or the other. Like in David's situation, he did both, and that's not a bad thing to do.
Yeah, I can see that, John. It's really, they're kind of like two different applications. One's more for electricity and one's more for natural gas, possibly. And if you had both, then you can save on natural gas, and instead of taking your electric off the grid to run all the apparatus that you have to have with geothermal, you can take it out of the sun. Well, getting back to the first question, like January, we didn't have any sun. Does it work okay? How's your system working? When you have weeks of cloudy days? And then the other thing is, what if you do have a few trees in your yard and how can you still get around? Does it work okay if you have shade and cloudy days all the time?
Yeah, well, what happens in January, right, is you don't produce much power. That's the reality. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, if you think in terms of how much you're producing, of course, it's kind of like one of these bell curves, which, you know, you're low in the winter and high in the summer. And so that happens anyway. And this January, of course, was not very good. But you know, that's what happens with weather, right? It changes from year to year. That's not a big surprise. I mean, what happens for, you know, unless you're off grid, and hardly any of us are off grid. Off grid means you're not connected to the utility. When it's real cloudy, you're basically buying more power from consumers' energy.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, in the other, what was the other question?
Well, then if you have trees in your yard,
Oh,
is that, can you just kind of forget about it, do you think? Or, I mean, if
well,
you're in shade.
and actually Fred can talk more about this. You know, they actually, with GIS systems and other sorts of technology now, they can do a very sophisticated analysis specific to your house, what shading occurs. And so a couple things happen then. One is they can place the solar system in an optimal location to minimize losses from shading. The other thing that's happened in recent years is now we have microinverters or optimizers. Back in the day when I put in my first system, there weren't any microinverters or optimizers. And what would happen if one panel was shaded, it would actually affect, because they're all connected together, the output from all of them. That doesn't happen anymore. Now they've got these microinverters. So let's say you've got a couple panels that get shaded in the afternoon. Obviously, you're losing some production, but now you don't lose production from the other panels, which is a big plus. And because, hey, Fred, do you sell both microinverters and optimizers, or you probably never sell a system without one or the other, I assume?
No, those days are long gone. And then, yeah, both of those options take all the shading stuff into play. And to piggyback off of John's answer there, that any solar installer should come on out, and they will be able to generate a model based upon satellite imagery of the pitch of the roof, the shading from the trees that are in there, and be able to develop a computer model to tell you, where the best spots on either the home or the property are to generate solar, and be able to predict on out based upon historical weather patterns, like how the system is going to produce. I know a lot of us in the industry even offer a production estimate guarantee, right? So if we say that it's going to make X number of watts, if we underproduce on our estimate, we actually refund you the cost of the difference there. When it comes to those trees that are in place, I was actually at a person's house last night that doesn't have a straight south-facing roof, and they do have some trees in place, and we walk you through the process of like, all right, here's where the best spots are, and then we'll talk you through the finances of like, okay, because of this, it'll take you 9 years to return to pay the panels to pay for themselves, or because of these trees, it'll take 13 years for the panels to pay for themselves. So any company that comes on out and speaks to you should be able to walk you through the process and show you what the ROI is on that investment.
That's great. Thanks. I appreciate that information. I gotta go do some shopping now.
Okay, good. For solar or groceries?
Well, a little bit of both.
If you find any good geothermal, Sam, let me know.
Okay.
Kim, go ahead.
I think Kim had a
Hi,
question.
yeah, just some comments, and then a couple of things if you have any knowledge about, or if you could comment on. As far as renewable energy legislation, that comes up at every coffee hour Sam Singh holds, and he's got he does a very good job of explaining exactly what's in the legislation. A lot of people are concerned about the siting laws and the control going to the MPSC. And, you know, if you have an opportunity to attend one of his coffee hours, that's a likely topic. The other thing I've seen, I know you guys are mostly talking about solar panels, and two things. I saw once, I believe it was in Ann Arbor, where they used the solar panels as kind of an awning almost. The house roof did not face south, but they had the side of the house that did face south. They used panels. They angled them away from the house so that they almost, you know, kind of shaded the windows a little bit. And I was wondering if you guys have ever seen that or know anything about that. And I've also seen some solar shingles instead of panels. And if you had any thoughts on that. And the last thing, I have also seen some new wind turbines that they're calling flower turbines. They're more upright and they don't have the big blades, you know, that you see up north around Mount Pleasant. And I was wondering if there are systems that tie in both solar and wind power. So any knowledge you have or comments you have to make, that'd be great.
Let's see, let me pass it to Fred first about the awnings, because I have seen it's more likely in commercial buildings where you have them on a wall at an angle, and so it becomes it's not really being used for shading, but it can. So Fred, do you know, has Absolute Solar actually done any solar panels that acted as like awnings on the side of a wall?
Yeah, we haven't had any of our prospective clients go forward with it, but we have designed a few projects along those lines. Now, because of the uniqueness of that right now, just like I was going to answer this with the wind concept, the uniqueness of it right now makes it a little trickier on the pricing standpoint, right? So because the materials have to be found, we got to track down the actual things, bring them on in. It's more expensive to do it that way than a traditional roof mount or a ground mount, but not impossible to make those things through. Plus, we want to make sure that we are working within good faith of the township and all of the permitting stuff. So we want to work hand in hand with those individuals. So a project like that is absolutely doable. We just haven't had a lot of people push forward with it yet. And to touch on that wind thing, because I teach a green energy class up here in DeWitt, and the idea of incorporating wind turbines with a solar system in a home setting is, again, theoretically doable because it's still creating direct current electricity. We're still processing everything through an inverter. There commercially isn't available a really reasonable, successful, what I would think would be called a micro wind turbine yet that we've run into or that I've run into in my dabblings with my students. But you're right, it's like we're super close from a technology standpoint. As opposed to having those giant ones that spin like this, we're talking our little guys that spin our VAUTs, our vertical axis turbines. And I've been looking at those for my own home. So I'm looking at them as well, but I haven't seen any that I can financially justify yet with my particular location, because again, you would need an expert to come on in and do an analysis of the site. How much clean wind versus dirty wind are we talking here? So there's a lot of factors at play. Absolute hasn't dealt with it yet, but you're not wrong in that it's coming.
Well, the one thing to keep in mind about the wind systems too is that you know, in order to get good production, you want to have steady winds and stronger winds. And so, if you're too close to the ground, whether it's a wind turbine with the 3 blades or the vertical axis ones or some of the newer designs, you're going to have trees and homes and other things kind of doing what Fred referred to as dirty wind. I mean, you're not going to get the production you want. So that's kind of just starting off. You know, even small wind turbines, if you really want a good production, you'd need to go 60, 70 feet in the air. And that's why the big ones, they keep getting taller and taller for the same reason. And so I see announcements about new wind turbine designs, probably every other week. Yeah, but I always kind of think, well, that's interesting, but it's close to the ground, and I just don't see how they're going to get good wind production. The solar shingles I actually had, my first system was solar shingles, Luma Resources from Oakland County. And in hindsight, I probably wouldn't do it again for two reasons. One is that, when you're a little off the roof, you get ventilation and a cooling effect, and the panels actually are more efficient. And so there's that factor. If you just my first system is right on the roof decking, and so obviously there's not a lot of ventilation to cool it off, because some people don't appreciate the fact that actually systems will work more efficiently at a cooler temperature. Like if you're out in the desert, you got a lot of sun, but you got a lot of temperature too, and that's kind of hits it the other way. The other thing about solar shingles is that they're typically quite a bit more expensive. And so that doesn't mean somebody might not want to do that, because there is the issue of, I'll call it just aesthetics, right? Some people might really like that look because it's not, off the roof. It is the roof. And that's got a different look to it, which was actually the reason I got my first system. I kind of like the idea of the aesthetics of it. But so that's something. And GAF is a major roofing company is getting into solar shingles now. I still think though that they're going to be a little more pricey, but maybe the costs will come down. Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, I just was wondering, John, why your organization has chosen to work through Absolute.
Oh, yeah. What happened was, that's a good question. Meridian Township ended up working with Absolute because the first programs we did, the hosts that we recruited wanted to work with Absolute or had Absolute as their contractor. And so that's the reason that Absolute has been interested in pursuing this program. So they basically are identifying their customers who are willing to be a host and be part of the presentation and do the marketing. And Leroy and I have actually sent a note out to 6 other solar installers just maybe a month ago. And we basically said, if you'd like to talk to us about doing programs in the township, let's get together. Because, if any solar installer can identify, a customer who's willing to kind of partner with us, we'd be happy to work with them. I don't know. Did that answer your question, Bob?
Yeah, yes, it did.
We're
John.
also encouraging people to get more than one bid for their solar system. So we're not necessarily advocating specifically for Absolute Solar. We're willing to work with other contractors or other hosts that have used other contractors. So
yeah, and we actually kind of throw, like Leroy says, we throw that out at these meetings that okay, in order to have a group buy, obviously you have to have a number of people and one installer, and so that's how the model works. But we kind of encourage people, hey, get some other proposals, because you might get a better price even without a discount, or if nothing else, you get another proposal, you'll be able to do some comparison shopping. One thing too, I'll just mention about the comparison shopping, because I was sitting down with an East Lansing resident just the other day, and he had 2 proposals, and it was confusing because one proposal basically was just the solar system, and one proposal included an upgrade to the electric panel, and also included a new roof And let's see. And so we were kind of backing out costs because what we wanted to do was be able to compare the two systems on just a solar system, dollars per watt, you know.
Mhm.
And it was interesting when we got to those numbers, one proposal was twice the other one. One was a little over $3 a watt, and one was like $7 per watt. And so the homeowner and I were kind of scratching our heads thinking, well, why is one so much more expensive than another? And really, we don't know. I mean, those of you who've done home projects realize when you get different bids, you kind of go, well, that's interesting. When I had an oak tree that I had to have cut down, the bids were $600, $1,200, and $1,600. And, you know, cutting down an oak tree there's no quality issue. Just cut it down, you know? And so I'm thinking, and I knew the company that did the $900 bid, I'd already used them and knew they did good work. So I was kind of thinking, well, why is the difference in price so much? Well, somebody wants to make more money. Who knows? You know.
I know that when I did mine, Bob, back in 18, I actually had 5 different companies come on out because that was the wild, wild west back then when companies were just sort of popping on up, and maybe they were going to be around next week, maybe they weren't. So there was a lot of comparison shopping. And you, at least, especially like with this group here and with Leroy and John, it's that idea of Solarize where you can lean on your neighbor, right? So talk to people that have been through the process before. They can speak about not just even the initial process, but like what happens after you write the final check, right? Like, is there any sort of follow-up? Or is that like, well, we'll see you never kind of thing? So it's lean in on these people that are around you to help you make those trickier decisions.
You know, and this is so basic. I keep running into people that somebody knocked on their door and they came in and they gave them a good sales pitch. And they said, hey, you don't have to have any money up front. And, you know, you're going to save this amount and save that amount. And they say, hey, should I go with them? And I said, well, you need to get at least 3 proposals and compare them. You know, I mean, this is kind of common sense, right? Does somebody knock on your door and you walk in and you write them a check for $60,000? I wouldn't do that. But that people are doing that. We had a company in Michigan called Power Home, who then became Pink when they went into bankruptcy. They were typically, these are out-of-state firms, national firms that have strong sales techniques, kind of a hard sell, and they will be knocking on people's doors, and they usually have some sort of financing gimmick too. And so they can basically make a pitch that, hey, no money down, no interest for a year, you know, you're going to save a lot of money, and yeah, best comparison shop.
We field a lot of phone calls from those folks, from the people that went with that company to try to help them out on the backside of things. So yeah, I'm with John. And again, as a representative of a company, I'm very proud of the work that we do, and I think that we are an excellent choice. But I'm also one of us. I'm a mid-Michigan resident, right? My kids go to school here. I want this industry to do well. So I want everybody in this room, to be very confident and happy with their solar system if they choose to go with one, regardless of if it's with us, because I want it to spread as an industry.
And I always
Good
look
question.
at the perspective that if you, you know, for this sort of investment, it's good to use a local firm that has some experience. And I know where Fred lives. So if I have a complaint, I can drive up to DeWitt and say, hey, Fred.
There you go.
That's helpful.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, John. Thanks, Fred.
Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, one additional question. Where do we stand, and not in Michigan particularly, but throughout the US with recycling of solar panels when they've exceeded their use.
From what I have read, we're making actually pretty good progress. Until fairly recently, I knew people were talking about it, but there's a new Solar Cycle is a company that's their business is recycling panels, and they just started I think they have 2 factories now, one in California, I think one in Texas, but they're recycling now thousands of panels. And so we're finally at the point now where, and they're looking to expand because there'll be more panels to recycle in the future. And they're getting, from what I have read, most of the materials out of the panels. So the biggest recycling problem with renewable energy is still wind turbine blades. They're composite materials that are hard to recycle, but they're working on that too.
Yeah, I did just see something here recently where there's a company down in Alabama that's starting to be able to deal with that and then resell that material to cement factories of all things on those. And they're starting to look at making those giant blades out of wood. Almost going back to old school. There's a new technology that Michigan State actually built their one of their new education buildings out of. That is all wood for building the larger buildings, and they're using that same technology to build the wind turbine blades.
Interesting.
Right.
Is there,
Yeah, seems like one of the benefits of solar has been helping people count their kilowatts. And for those of you that have solarized, what are some of the major appliances that you've selected or swapped out that have given the most significant savings of kilowatts? I see Roger's got one in the background.
Yeah, Roger, give us your perspective being a solar owner.
What Leroy is pointing out is the mini split heat pump that I have in my porch. Become a huge convert of heat pumps for heating and cooling. When we enclosed our porch last year, we put in this mini split to add heat because we had no heat ducts out here, and it's just been a miracle. I can't say enough good things about these air-to-air heat pumps nowadays. This is 10 times more efficient than our main HVAC system in the house in terms of the output per input. It's just remarkable. And even in the 0-degree weather in January, it was able to find some heat outside to heat this porch up. And even as I sit here now, it's running and warming me on a relatively cool day. So I really like this system, and I also like it so much that I put one in my camper. So I'm no longer using propane heat in my camper for when we camp. So it's just a really, really good deal, and I'm thinking that ultimately we might go this direction altogether when we need to replace our main HVAC system someday.
Hey, Roger, how much of your solar system, we saw your picture of your solar system on your garage there, how much of your power is being produced by that system? And now you have an additional electric load, right, in addition to an EV. So would you consider expanding in the future? And again, what percentage of the nice thing about solar is, like, it's not either or. You can get 10% of your power from the system. You can get 50%, 100%, just depending on what your site is like.
Yeah, well, we have a unusual site for solar. I think the Absolute had trouble not laughing when they came in and looked at our house because we've got so many trees on the main house. We put it on the garage, which faces west, certainly not ideal. And we do also have shading, which seriously affects our output for solar. But the system on the garage is 7.5 kilowatts, and it's producing roughly half of the power needs of the house. We do have a small system that's an additional system that we use for our electric car that helps that. But the electric car uses a significant amount of power compared to our house. So that's a load that we're considering how we might deal with someday. And probably the best way to handle that long-term is to add batteries. We don't have batteries right now in our main system. And we produce a lot of power in the summer that we send back to the utility. And I would love to put that into batteries and then charge the car at night with those batteries. So that's probably our next step, simply because we don't have any more room for solar. We just have too many trees that we like too much. So.
Roger, expense wise for that, for your sunroom or whatever, where do you think it was in terms of going the typical standard way? Was it a whole lot more? Was it comparable?
Well, to have added heat ducts to our porch would have been very expensive because we would have had to go through brick and cement block, and it really would have been a challenge to put a conventional heating system out here on the porch that would have been drawing off of our main system. So the mini split was really the only reasonable way to go. We could have added resistance heating, but resistance heating is way, way less efficient than this heat pump. I just can't say enough good things about these mini splits for their efficiency and the use of the electricity. So we really didn't even consider resistance heating. That would have really whacked our electric use a lot. And the heat pump's just quietly sitting here running away and not using all that much power.
What did you call it? Mini what?
It's called a mini split heat pump.
Okay.
And it's called a mini split because there's both an indoor unit and an outdoor unit. And what you see behind me on the wall is the indoor unit. That's just a quiet fan running, pulling the either cool air or warm air, depending on the season, out of what the outdoor compressor is doing. So the outdoor compressor is finding, it basically it's moving heat from the outside to the inside this time of year. And even though that seems kind of weird because it's not very warm out there, it's working.
Okay, thank you.
Are you using it much in the summer for cooling, or wouldn't you need it much for cooling?
It does run in the summer, but not like it does in the winter for heating. We insulated the porch really well. We've got good windows here, so it's not a big demand anyway. But it does run and it does work fine for cooling if it's needed.
Has anyone noticed any big changes with refrigerators or furnace blowers or other appliances? Just
I know
curious.
that when I put mine on in, I put in something called an energy sense monitor. So what it lets me do is now I know when any electrical appliance in my house gets turned on. So it's the ultimate dad maneuver of like, did you shut off your lights in your bedroom? Because now at any moment I can see exactly how much energy my house is using, and I know exactly where it's being used. So having that information readily available to me sort of changed a lot of our behaviors of like, oh, we got to build into our routines to, not to do laundry at this time, or to make sure that we're not leaving things running on in the background, those vampires. Because Roger talked about insulating his that screened in area there. The first thing that maybe I wish I would have known back when I started this journey is like the biggest bang for your buck, and the best way to do all of this is to start by eliminating your electrical need as much as you can, and then figuring out how to generate otherwise. But having something as simple as that little device, which was like a couple $100, started to change my family's behavior. And we started to see that play out almost immediately in our bills.
What was that called?
It's called a Sense Energy Monitor. I'll put a link in the chat on Amazon. And Absolute installs it for a little fee, but also I installed it and I'm not an electrician. So a few YouTube videos, if you're even remotely comfortable with that kind of stuff, is not a bad move. I'll put a link in the chat to it.
Great. We have about 5 more minutes. If anyone has any questions or related or unrelated, I want to thank Fred and John and Roger and all of you for great questions. Yeah.
mention that, for these days with solar systems, you can get, if you like numbers and data, there's an infinite amount of data that you can look at on the web, because all systems now kind of through Wi-Fi connect to a portal where you can, basically go in and kind of look what you're producing today, yesterday, the past month, the past year, compare years to year. You can see how much each panel is producing. You can really go crazy with the statistics if you're into that sort of thing. But it is helpful to kind of what makes it helpful is you can kind of see how things are going, but also you can easily find out if there's like a specific microinverter or a specific panel that's not doing the job, because it'll show up. And if you don't notice it, somebody else will, and they'll kind of go, hey, by the way, your eighth panel from the left has got a problem. Actually, that's one thing about solar systems too. There's really, I've never had a maintenance issue ever with either of my solar systems. They just, that's the nature of electronics, I guess. They don't, you might have an initial microinverter that goes bad or something in the first year, but typically, there's nothing to oil, nothing to even think about.
It's the advantage of less moving parts. And sort of one of the advantages of like the electric car, there's just less things that could go wrong. So
Before I forget, I want to mention, if you have a suggestion for a future speaker or topic, let me know. We do have Sam Lovell's going to be talking about the book that he's recently written in a couple weeks on the 28th at the Green Dialogue. So Sam, thank you. Is that still on for you? Looking forward to that. Anybody else?
That's just unmuted. Sure. We're good to go with that, Lorraine.
Great.
And will it be available for purchase soon then?
Yeah, I'm being told early March, probably. It could even be late February, but I would not count on it. I would probably say early March.
Great. Any other parting comments or announcements? Questions? We got 3 minutes.
Oh, well, yeah, we did mention April 1st will be our first Solarize meeting. If you or anybody might be interested, at the Township Hall, April 1st.
I have one quick question. What kind of fish is that above your head there, Fred?
that would be a northern pike from northern Saskatchewan, of all places. You wouldn't catch that in the looking glass around here. So it looks like a muskie, but that's actually a northern pike.
Okay.
Just like that looks like a whitetail, but it's not. That's a mule deer hanging out back behind you. So all of my family's opportunities to spend time out west has provided all the decorations for my classroom.
Thank you.
Real quick, Fred, since you get around a little bit, sounds like traveling, does your business go as far into like northern Michigan at all for solar?
We have, yep. We've made our way. We have worked in other states, and we have worked outside of the mid-Michigan area.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll make this recording available on the Home TV website, YouTube channel, and everyone have a great. Oh, Tess, you have one more question. Oh, you're clapping. Sorry.
Clapping. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
We'll take that. That's more interaction than I get from my students. Thanks, Tess.
Bye-bye.